Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. As the world continues to battle COVID and its spread, there is a race just as fast to try and find a solution to the situation and, of course, create a vaccine for COVID. The Serum Institute has been working just in that regard. They are the largest manufacturers of vaccines by volume, and they've got 3 partners with whom they potentially hope to find that solution and manufacture a COVID vaccine candidate. Joining me now to speak about that and where things have developed so far is Adar Poonawalla of the Serum Institute. Adar, thank you for joining in. The world is quite literally breathing down your neck, waiting to hear some news. Tell us what it is that you'd like to share in terms of developments that have occurred in the last fortnight.
Well, yes, very rightly put. I'm feeling the pressure, the sense of responsibility that is mounting up. And I'm trying to explain to people and manage their expectations that, whilst we're developing some of our projects, which will take about 2 or 3 years to fructify, we have got 1 or 2 manufacturing partnerships with some very early stage development projects, like you've been hearing about with AstraZeneca and Oxford and some of the others, where we could see a vaccine if the trials prove safety and efficacy, and that's a big if, by the end of this year. So that's where we're at the moment. And a lot of people keep asking, when are we going to see some results? Is it failed? Is it working? So I've said, please forgive me, but I cannot comment, and nobody can comment for that matter, whether anything is working or not until all the phase 3 trials are completed. So that will establish the safety in phase 1 and then the efficacy in phase 3. So we must be patient for just a few months, and we'll get some results by then.
There's a lot that you mentioned over there, and I'm going to unpack all of it, Adar. But there is a sense, I think, that people want a resolution to this solution within 2020. Would you say on that, expectations need to be calibrated? Because as one has seen in the past, we're talking about a vaccination. It's not going to be an overnight, eureka moment.
Yeah. So as everybody knows, or well, now they're getting to know, a vaccine normally takes 3 to 5 years to develop and show efficacy and safety in multiple trials. Now you're trying to squeeze that into 1 year. We don't want to rush anything. We don't want to skip anything. We want to make sure what we give to our people here in India and other parts of the world is safe and efficacious. Now, having said that, we cannot wait for a cure or a vaccine to come about. We have to go about our normal lives with precautions, keeping the elderly and the immunocompromised away, and live with this new normal. A vaccine may come about at the end of this year. It may take 2 years. It may take 3 years. It may be someone in the United States that makes one and doesn't give enough to India. That may happen as well. Anything can happen right now. We in India, as an Indian vaccine producer, and there are some others also in Hyderabad and Delhi who are trying to produce the vaccines. They've got their own partnerships. Some of them are developing it themselves, and all that's going to take time. We cannot wait for a vaccine or a cure to come out. We have to get on with doing whatever it is we do, working partly from home, having these precautions, staying away from the elderly, which I know may be difficult in our culture because in India, we live with our parents, grandparents, and not everybody has a second home or a place where you can do that. But we have to see and do whatever, maximum we can do.
Let's talk about the research findings from Oxford University, Adar. That's the most recent news that's out, where there was no rejection because of failure in terms of testing on monkeys. But I think, as you pointed out, there was limited, achievement in other areas. Why don't you?
Let me correct you. There wasn't any failure at all. This is firstly just 6 monkeys, which is not enough to prove anything or do anything. What it showed is that it prevented pneumonia, which is what kills you actually. And if you can prevent the virus from going into your lungs and having that immunostorm in your lungs where you build up fluid and other things, which then result in you going out of breath and finally needing oxygen or a ventilator to bring you back out of that, it has worked for that. So actually it's if you want to talk about success and failure, it's succeeded to do that. Now, you cannot come to any conclusion in animals based on antibodies or this or anything else like that. This is just a protocol and a procedure that is done before you go into humans. So we have to wait and see how the humans react. Now, if you were to tell me at the end of phase three, um, do we have antibodies coming to the point where you've got some other vaccine candidates which have higher antibodies? Is that what's required? My answer is no. We need to see if the disease and deaths in the vaccinated population and group in the trial is showing a significant difference to the placebo, which has got nothing. And if that proves itself, the regulators, I'm sure, will license the vaccine. So I think it's not just about antibodies. You know, different vaccines elicit a different mechanism and pathway to give you a different kind of immune response. Some have a long-term immune response, some have a short-term immune response. Take, for example, the flu vaccine that we make and some others make, which is a nasal flu vaccine. Now, that doesn't show and give the antibodies, but that goes in through the nose and the mucosa, which gives you that protection there. And in a trial, you can prove that the vaccinated group gets far less or very little flu compared to the non-vaccinated group. Now, the injectable flu vaccine, for example, gives you those antibodies and a way to see in a blood test, you know, that you've got neutralizing antibodies and therefore that vaccine might be more effective. But that's not the case. You need to see the clinical results in human beings, how deep and far the disease progresses, and then you can come to a conclusion, yes, this vaccine is effective or not. Because ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to reduce the severity and not have deaths. And that's the objective of a vaccine. And that's where even the recombinant BCG vaccine that we're entering into clinical trials in the month of June in India and in other parts of the world, which is proven to show that it might have some effect in reducing the severity of the disease. So this is what we're talking about.
That's actually the point I was coming to, Adar. I know you have made that comment as well, saying perhaps 100% efficacy may not be possible. Do you think that might be the step-through process of this, that there will be partial benefit of a vaccination, and and that's how one resolves oneself around this situation?
Well, even a COVID vaccine, whichever one comes about, will probably be 70 to 80% effective. No vaccine today, even the ones we produce, are 100% effective. In fact, there are licensed vaccines, not the ones we make, but there are some which are 40 and 50% effective as well. And there's always a cost benefit in terms of whether it's worth it or not. And if the disease is severe enough, the deaths, the ailment, and other morbidity and mortality is considered very serious. Some vaccines with a lower efficacy also could potentially be licensed.
You did talk about AstraZeneca briefly, Adar. They have actually recorded the vaccine as an Astra product. Do you see any conflict of interest within this? Because that will have to resolve itself as well.
No, not at all. We've got a very good conversation going on with them, and we're just in fact in the process of deciding, who does what and in what volumes and et cetera, and we'll have a signed agreement very soon. We would have had that with Oxford, but then that was changed over to AstraZeneca, and we have a very good relationship with them, and that's going on very smoothly. Now, having said that, I don't want to and I cannot comment on anything at this stage right now because it's an ongoing matter, and any ongoing matters should not be commented about in the media because that's not appropriate, and we don't want to, annoy anybody or insult anybody or with that process, and we must wait till everything is done and signed, and then we can talk about it.
And the Codagenix partnership?
Codagenix is going on well. We believe that will be a very powerful vaccine. It will, because it's live attenuated. And more importantly, it has something perhaps a lot of these other vaccine candidates don't have, and that's the ability to cover a broad spectrum of the virus. So these mutations and other things people have been concerned about, that issue will probably not be there if the vaccine is safe and works, because it will cover a broad spectrum, because it's taking the entire virus and dealing with that. And attenuating it, which is removing the harmful properties and doing that genetically. So I think that's a very different approach. It's going to take 2-3 years to finish because we're just going to enter into animal studies in another month with that. And then, that's naturally, therefore, about a year behind uh, Moderna and the Chadox candidate and some of the others who've gone into early stage uh, clinics and trials. So, but we have very high hopes for that vaccine because of this reason that I've mentioned. And this virus, being a zoonotic virus, could very well mutate. So far, luckily, we haven't seen significant mutations which the existing vaccine candidates cannot cover. So right now, all the scientists working on the vaccines feel that their vaccine candidates will be able to take care of the existing minor mutations which are there. But again, we'll have to see. I can't comment and guarantee anything. Things could change by the time the vaccine is launched. A lot can happen by December, November, December, and then maybe some of these vaccines will have to go back to the drawing board and be modified. And then we don't know if we'll have to do another trial again to prove those. We don't know if we'll have to give both this vaccine and the new modified vaccine, to people to cover all the different mutations. So it's a very dicey area right now, and nobody knows which way it's going to go. We don't even know how many shots of a vaccine we're going to have to take to give you the long-term immuno effect, because nobody knows that until we have that kind of time to see and test people later on in a phase 4 or other subsequent studies to see all that. So these are all the questions that I think on the minds of the scientists, the developers, the manufacturers, including the media who've been asking, who don't know what to make of all this because it's all very new to them. But I think we just have to wait, and then we'll have the answers to all these questions.
Imagine, Adar, the media has gone from being reporters to climate experts to epidemiologists. I don't know what they will have to be by the
Economists, epidemiologists, economists, scientists, I think. So
yes,
everybody is now getting
yes.
a,
Bilateral
schooling, being
relation
schooled in
experts
that.
as well, I might add. Assuming things go well, Adar, what's the plan in terms of manufacturing? You mentioned you've got some, early conversations going. How's that going to lay out? Have you set targets? Is it too early?
So I think it'll all depend on the conversations I'm having both with the state and central governments to procure and take some of the risk of this manufacturing. If we do make millions of doses, maybe even hundreds of millions of doses in the next 6 months, because I've said that yes, I'm willing to get the ball rolling, take some personal risk and start that. But unless I get donors, whether it's from, I don't know, BARDA, the Gates Foundation, Government of India, and other philanthropists, there's only so much risk that I could take personally myself. And yes, of course, I'll have a few million doses for the country. That's my contribution. And I've sacrificed other commercial products in those facilities where I will be doing this. But we'll have to wait and see. And as I said, I will talk to the government in a very serious manner in a month once I have confidence that I can make a few million doses. I don't want to go out for a handout, to take money in advance from the government of India without having anything to show for it. So I want to first consistently show that I can produce good quality vaccines, and then we'll go from there.
Will pricing remain at that 1,000 rupee pencil line, Adar? And just as an extension of that, I know you made the point that perhaps the government should consider including this vaccination within the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Any headway on that?
Uh, well, it was just a figure that a guesstimate that we thought that's how much it's going to cost if we don't have the manufacturing plant subsidized. But if you look at what's happening all over the world, the governments of those countries which have the manufacturing capabilities are giving hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars to manufacturers. And we haven't seen that in our country yet. Perhaps if the Indian government were to give, I don't know, $200 million to a manufacturer in turn could provide that product at $2 a dose or $3 a dose instead of $10 a dose. But if you expect the manufacturer to provide a product, at $2 a dose with no advance commitment of the vaccine being bought, no subsidy on the manufacturing plant, uh, that's not going to be possible because somebody somewhere is going to have to pay for it. So you either have a commercially priced vaccine or you have a subsidized priced vaccine by the government. And the US is doing it, the UK is doing it, France is doing it. Um, and we need to do that here in India as well. And I'm sure that will happen. The government has never said no. In fact, the ICMR has come forward to support and financially fund our BCG vaccine trials, and I'm sure they'll do a lot more. So, we'll have to wait and see how all that happens. But again, as I said, I don't want to get into all that, including the pricing or anything, till I'm confident and I also get an idea of the costing once I start manufacturing in a month. So we have to wait for that at least.
How did you read the news from Moderna?
Um, I'm told that a very high dose of the vaccine is to be given, and 2 shots have to be given. So I don't know how much of a reaction in a human being that's going to cause, you know, in the short term and long term. Having said that, it's also messenger RNA, and we don't know that technology hasn't been proven before in the world for vaccines. Um, I certainly hope it'll work. I'm sure it's got a very high chance because it's been backed financially by some very astute investors, and it's got a fantastic team. I think that has, joined them from some very reputed and good companies. So again, we'll have to wait and see. Right now, they may have shown some antibody responses, but that's not really conclusive in any way that it will be an effective vaccine. So we'll have to again wait and watch.
Adar, you've been in this game much longer than any one of us has. It's just that all of us are sort of, facing the spotlight on you now. And there's suddenly so many technologies being tried, the adenovirus, RNA, DNA. What's your own sense of who gets to the finishing line first?
Anybody's guess again. It's still too early in the race to guess that. I think it would probably be a technology which is easy to scale up. I think it'll probably be somebody who is willing to partner with multiple manufacturers to do that. Because, there are some institutions who feel they want to hold the cards close to their chest and control everything. I don't know if those institutions in the United States and others will partner with everyone else and be selfless in having multiple partnerships and allowing other people to manufacture their products. So it'll all depend on that. And, because once a vaccine is developed, somebody's going to have to make it. And if you don't have an open mind in doing that, then maybe you make a product which you could produce probably 50 or 100 million doses, but that's nowhere enough to what the world needs. We need 6-7 billion doses eventually over the next 2 to 3 years, and that's only possible with having multiple partnerships and keeping an open mind whilst doing that. I don't know, tomorrow if a Chinese vaccine succeeds, the question will be, will, even if they're willing to partner out, and I don't know if they are, will a US company or an Indian company partner and be allowed to produce that vaccine? These are all the questions that will probably be answered in a few months, but these are some of the things which could factor in, to answer your question, which vaccine may succeed or not succeed, and which first or second or third.
Yeah. That was actually my final question to you, Adar. I mean, at this point, China remains an exception to the vaccine race. What are the chances, to your own mind, that they actually go out and try and portray themselves as benefactor and produce this vaccine at very low cost or distribute it free of cost? You've seen this market longer than any of us have. Do you see a chance of that?
Well, I don't know why you say they're not in the race to make a COVID vaccine. I'm sure, in fact,
And at least
that
we
they
are.
were, at least I think they were probably the first to act because of what happened in their country to get the strains and deal with the virus and start developing a vaccine probably 2 or 3 months before anyone else did. And they probably, in fact, have a head start on the world. So I would not be surprised if they're one of the first to even have a vaccine license, at least in China. And then we'll have to see how other countries and regulators see their product and safety and the overall environment, which right now, the atmosphere is anti-Chinese, but I think that'll change over time, and people are understanding that it's not something that was manufactured in China. It was just that because of the proximity to what they eat and how these zoonotic viruses spread, it started off there in China. So we shouldn't hold them accountable for that, but perhaps hold them accountable for sharing more information, being more transparent, and being more open in their spirit of partnering with other companies, which traditionally has not been there. For example, we've tried to sell a lot of products in China and we haven't been able to because of their rules and regulations. And I hope they open up also, and allow us to come to China and sell things and products which has not been allowed because of artificial barriers to entry that they've put. And that's partly why the world has got this hatred against China, which China can easily change this perception. Whether it's with the US or India or others, we can't sell anything in China, but China sells in our countries and takes an advantage of our economies. That's not fair, and that should change. And I think if that changes, we'll all can work together in a globalized economy and really have free borders and trade.
Are you worried though, Adir, about the speed with which it has spread within India? I mean, of course, the fatality has been lower, but now there are reports of the migrant labor that made their move from urban communities back into rural hinterland, which is where now the numbers are beginning to really explode.
I don't think you're going to see as many cases in the rural areas for two or three reasons. There will be cases, but you probably won't see them because of course, lack of testing in those areas. How are you going to have testing in those villages? So you probably won't know how much of the disease is spreading there. But also, don't forget, because of the spread and thinning out in those areas, you will probably see less infection, of course, compared to your five or six main metro cities, which have international flights, foreigners, business, interaction, public transport, in these congested cities and areas where you'll have these gatherings. So I think if we stay clear of large religious gatherings, other public events, concerts, practice your social distancing, we can maintain an acceptable spread of the disease, even in the metropolitan and this urban areas. And look, eventually, a large part of the population is going to get the disease. We know that the epidemiologists have said it. The only question is how fast is it going to get there compared to how soon a vaccine is going to come there to, you know,
Fight it.
fight it. So let's see what happens. And I think in 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to have a level of herd immunity, not now, but it's going to take 4 or 5 years between the vaccine and your general herd immunity coming together and eventually creating a much safer environment for the elderly and the immunocompromised, which I would say, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, would certainly be at a high risk category and should take all the precautions they possibly can, and that would be my sincere advice. Beyond that, we're all guessing about what is going to happen, what could happen. So,
I appreciate your time today, Adir. Thank you so much for joining in with your thoughts.
pleasure. Nice to be with you. Thank you.